Kubota tractor was reported as needing power. Couldn't make it up the hill pulling the manure spreader. And that's all I got. So I'm assuming it's a fuel issue. And there are several things that it could be. If it was, well, the other likely thing it could be, if the air filter was clogged up, it would be belching out black smoke, and that would rob power too. I did something to it to limp it back up here, and it did not smoke, so I'm confident that that's not it. I'm sure that it's fuel, and I'll explain what I did eventually. It still had a few symptoms, but if the tractor's just wanting for power, if it's you try to rev it up and it just doesn't go anywhere, there are a couple things that it could be. And we're going to start with one of the simplest. It's back here at the fuel filler cap. Now, believe it or not, this is actually a vented cap. It's two pieces. I don't know if you can see that, but where the knurls are that you can grab your fingers is a separate piece from inside where the rubber is. And this is actually vented. And it needs to be vented because as you're pulling fuel out of the tank, you're going to create a vacuum. You need to be able to let air back in. And if it does create a vacuum, eventually the vacuum is going to be stronger than the power of the pump pulling out, and you're not going to be able to get fuel. And I know this happens. The first time I was aware of it, I actually caused it. Before we put the tether on it, the fuel cap, when the tractor was refueled, would always get set right here because it's a convenient place to put it, and then forgotten about. And then the tractor would drive off and the cap would fall off somewhere in the driveway and get run over. Well, the first time I found it, this is not the first fuel cap. It's probably not the second or third. But anyway, I found the first one. It had broken apart. The two halves had come apart. So I glued them together because without these knurls on it, you can't grip it. It's hard to get off. And the simplest thing seemed like just some good adhesive, stick it together. Unfortunately, that blocked the vent that I didn't realize was there until the tractor stopped. And when that happens, when you've pulled a vacuum in the tank, your symptoms are going to be not only do you not have power, the tractor's going to shut off, and it's probably not even going to idle because it can't get any fuel. So it's pretty easy to diagnose. You come back, the cap may be really, really tight because it's vacuum pulling on it. And when you open it, you may hear a hiss, almost like a soda bottle opening, and that's the air rushing in. And depending on how much fuel is in it, if it's not very full, you've got a big space in there that has started to, with the vacuum, it started to collapse the tank. When you break the seal, you'll actually hear it thump where the tank expands back to full size, and you'll hear a bang. And if that's the case, you want to look and see if it's clogged up around the two pieces, because it's supposed to breathe around there. And in the past, it has been gunked up because it's happened a couple other times where it built up, I don't know, dust, gunk, whatever. So the fix is you clean it. Probably wouldn't hurt to get a new fuel cap eventually, but I can't buy any parts, so this is what we got. And then obviously, once you've released the vacuum, the tractor's going to run fine until it builds up a vacuum again. So use your judgment if you want to run around without the cap on it to finish what you're doing, or get an empty water bottle, stick it over there just to keep fuel from sloshing out, or more importantly, from crud from going in. But in any case, that's one of those things that happens every once in a while. And it's easy to fix. It's real easy to diagnose if you know what to look for. And that should be one of the first things you check if the tractor shuts off on its own and cranks and doesn't restart. The other likely culprit is the fuel filter getting clogged up. We have junk in our fuel, and it's a very, very fine, I don't know what, but it comes through, to extent, it comes through the filter at the fuel tank, although it also clogs that up real quick too. Remember, if the big tank gets filled, don't pump fuel out of it for a day. Let the junk settle out, otherwise you'll clog that filter, the one that's on the tank at the pump, and then you won't be able to pump fuel out. In any case, some of that that fine dust gets through, and it'll eventually clog up the filter, which is right here. We also have, there, you see it? I don't think it'll focus with my arm pointing in there at it. It's a sediment bowl and a water separator down there. Fortunately, our fuel is usually just dirty and not wet, so you don't have to worry about it too much. There's a little float that will show you if there's a bunch of water in there, but we don't have water, we have junk. There is also the shutoff valve. All right, I'm going to turn it and you're going to see something that looks different. See that little tail sticking out there that's horizontal now that was vertical? That shuts off the fuel from the tank. And you want to do that when you change the filter or clean out the sediment bowl. Because it's very important that you only have fuel in the fuel lines. You don't have air. Because over here, your injection pump, which is the next stop on the fuel's journey, where it gets pumped to the injectors, that's got to be under tremendous pressure to get into the cylinder. And if there's air in there, the air compresses and it doesn't allow the fuel to squirt in like it's supposed to. So it's very, very important to not have air in your fuel system. And now if you're taking that filter off, you're cracking the seal, you're going to be introducing a whole lot of air. So when you remove the filter, we'll first turn off the valve to the tank. It also wouldn't hurt to clean out the sediment bowl. There is a ring. Oh yeah, it's fun to work on because it's really, really tight in there. You see those vertical slats below the shutoff lever? That's a ring that threads on, that holds the sediment bowl on. You want to try to get as much dust out of there as you can so it doesn't fall in. But unthread it, dump it out, wipe the sludge that's in the very bottom of it. There's a float and there might be a spring, I don't remember for sure. Don't lose the contents. And then put that back on. The fuel filter, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It doesn't need to be super tight. But when it's on there, when you put the new one on, there's no fuel in it, right? You have air now in your system. So there is a mechanism to bleed out the air. On top, all right, see, it's out of focus, of course. This little, like, plunger on top of the filter, on top of the filter housing, that gray round thing, is a pump that you push down. And when you push on it, you're actually drawing fuel from the tank and pumping it into the filter to fill the sediment bowl and the filter. Now, if you're pumping fuel into that filter that's full of air, the air has to go somewhere, right? Because it's a closed system. So what you have to do when you're priming it like that is open this little valve right here. Again, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. This is the return. Let's see, this line goes back to the fuel tank. And that lets you, when you pump on that, you're pressurizing things and you're pumping into the injection pump and through it, and this is letting it go. This is letting the air go back to the tank. And who cares? You know, once the air gets to the tank, it's fine. The tank's full of air. So you're going to have to pump on that a lot, like, I don't know, 100 times. You'll kind of be able to tell. You'll feel it'll get harder when it's full of fuel. And you can't pump on it too much. It's better to waste some time circulating fuel, because once all the air's out, you're just going to be pumping fuel back from this end of the tank. And that's fine. And you can start it with this open and it'll run, and that'll be good to help if there's any air that's missed. It'll help purge it out. When you put the tractor back in service, you do want to close this valve. It doesn't run quite right with it open. But it's essential. If you change the fuel filter or if you run it out of fuel and it's gotten air in it, you've got to purge it out like that. And I haven't had to do it on this tractor, but if air gets too far along, you may have to crack the fittings on these lines actually at the injectors, which you're probably going to have to take the hood off. There's one. It's going to be hard to get to. And if it comes to that, that's a whole other situation. I mean, you want to use the proper sized wrench, and the fittings are going to be like these, basically. But you want to have a wrench to hold it, and then another wrench to open it, just like a quarter turn. And one of the things you can do is, if it does run a little bit and it runs rough, watch out because the fan's right here. Whichever one has the air in it when it's running, you should see bubbles come out and it won't change. So if it's running rough, like only 3 cylinders are running properly, when you crack another one, you're taking away fuel that's going in there. So it's going to, if that cylinder is firing okay, it's not going to anymore. It's going to make it run even worse. So if you crack one of these open and the engine doesn't change, then that's the one that had the air, because that one wasn't working right to begin with. Does that make sense? In any case, I hope it doesn't come to that. That's a kind of an extreme situation. Hopefully you can use the purge pump on the top of the filter housing and open the purge valve here. I guess it's called the purge valve. That's what I'm calling it. And prime everything and get your air out of the system. It's also, if you run the tractor completely out of fuel, you probably have to do this. And I'm going to replace the fuel filter anyway, but part of me suspects that the tractor was run out of fuel, because the report I was given was no power, couldn't climb the hill. They put fuel in it because they didn't trust the gauge, and the gauge moved. Now, I don't know how much fuel they put in it. I took the key out and hit it, of course, because it's out of service. But there's not much showing in the tank anyway. And if it was going up a hill and all the fuel was running to the back of the tank, and if it was almost empty, it may have sucked up some air. And that may have been the problem right there. I don't know. I wasn't there when it happened. So what I did to recover it, very first thing I did was crack the cap on the tank. Listen for a hiss, listen for a thump, although it had sat for a day, so it probably would have, the vacuum probably would have gone away somehow on its own. But I opened the purge valve, started it up, let it idle for a while, unhooked it from the spreader while it's still running with the purge valve open, hooked the other tractor to the spreader, ran out the spreader, and then came back. The tractor was still running. And in theory, if there was any air in the bottom side of it, that should have let it purge out. If it's actually up in the injectors, that's not going to. Anyway, the tractor drove back to the farm up a steep hill pretty much fine. It sounded like it may have not been running 100%. I don't know. That might have fixed it. Again, I almost never see these situations firsthand. I'm always putting together clues and trying to solve the mystery. And running it out of fuel is a definite possibility with the way things work around here. Like I said, I'm still going to put a fuel filter on it because I have one, fortunately. And it's just it's a maintenance thing. It needs it from time to time. The other possibilities, and this is why I didn't want to spend the little bit of Mother's Day Sunday time I had on this tractor not knowing for sure what it was when I could just get the other one in service. Two other things that could cause this to not get fuel. It's the fuel pump, which is down in there. So there's a mechanical pump that brings the fuel from the tank through the filters and feeds the injection pump. If that quit, the injection pump can actually pull fuel on its own, I think, to run the tractor pretty well. Because I replaced the fuel pump once. It took a while to diagnose it. And even though it's, the injection pump is not supposed to be drawing fuel, it can. And, this tractor spends most of its life idling or, running less than 1,500 RPM. So it could have a clogged filter or the lift pump not working, and you'd never know because it's really not asking for a whole lot of fuel. And then when you rev it up to do something PTO driven, like the spreader or a mower, all of a sudden it's starving for fuel, even though it had been fine before. And that was something that I should have mentioned before about the filter. So, clogged fuel filter. Common symptom for that is you won't be able to get any RPM out of the motor. It'll idle fine. And that's because, the filter's not 100% clogged yet. It can get a little bit of fuel in. And for idling, it only needs a little bit of fuel. When you start giving it some throttle and put a load on it, it needs more fuel, because you're doing more work. And the few little spaces that are left in that filter open just can't supply what it needs. So if it idles and just doesn't have any power revving up, won't rev up, that's another typical symptom for the fuel filter being clogged. Whereas if the tank has a vacuum in it, it's not even going to idle. But anyway, so we were talking about the pump. That's kind of the same situation. If the lift pump's not working, the injection pump can feed itself. But then if the fuel filter is a little bit dirty and offering some resistance, then the injection pump's going to struggle. And you might get some symptoms. Diagnosing the fuel pump, you pretty much have to undo the line, crank the motor, and see if it squirts fuel out. That's the simplest way. And it's all just buried in there and hard to get to. Now, when you do that, remember, you've just broken open the system, so now you've got to purge it. You've got to open the purge valve. You could probably just let it run a little bit with the purge valve open. And then the fourth thing that can happen, that has happened to prevent fuel getting to the motor, is the pickup inside the fuel tank can get clogged with the sludge that's in our fuel. And that can be kind of mistaken for the fuel pump not working, because the fuel pump's not going to be able to pump anything if it can't suck it out of the tank. So you want to find the fuel line that goes from the tank to the pump, and you want to try to blow into the tank. Now, there's two important things about this. I mean, I guess you could try sucking on it too, but it's safer to blow. When you're testing it, you kind of need to be brave and just blow with your mouth, just to see if there's any resistance. And then the fix is compressor and blast some air in it to blow the junk out of it. I guess you could skip the mouth part and just blow with the compressor, but if you're going to do that, before you put the compressor on there, take the fuel cap off, because you do not want to be putting compressed air into that tank and making it into a pressure vessel and blowing it up. You want it to be able to blow the junk out of the line, but that air needs to go somewhere, right? It needs to be able to come out of the tank. And that's something that happens periodically. And that can be, that can combine with the lift pump quitting, can combine with the clogged fuel filter. So you just kind of have to diagnose one at a time and see what's there. But, so to review, fuel issues. Clogged vent on the cap, making a vacuum in the tank. Clogged fuel filter. Lift pump quit, or blocked line fuel pickup down inside the tank. And like I said, for now, I'm going to start replacing the filter. I'll probably try to blow on the line and just see if it feels like it's clogged too, and hope for the best. Here's something I should have mentioned before that I just kind of was doing. I've got the purge valve open. I tried pushing on the pump, the priming pump on top of the filter, and it doesn't want to move. So it doesn't push down at all. So that is probably ruling out the lift pump. Probably means the filter is clogged because it can't move fluid, or the pickup. But I'm going to start with the filter. And then if I put the new filter on and I can pump it, then I know we're getting fuel through where it needs to. And I'll feel pretty confident about that.